Hi, I'm Brian Stark. I'm also known as the States Runner. I'm a teacher from the US, and even though I grew up in southern Indiana and spent 20 years in Arizona, I didn't really have too much of a firm grasp of the world or culture or history because I just didn't study that much as a kid. I was active, but not necessarily academic. So the teacher becomes the student. I have been a long distance runner most of my life, starting in middle school, high school, college, ran cross country and the distance events and track. And then after college, I hiked the Appalachian Trail and then later went on to even longer things. So this is a little story about a recent run I did in Italy. These images are, some of them are of Tuscany and beautiful, beautiful landscape there. I didn't know much about Italy at all beforehand, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, years ago, shortly after college, I hiked the Appalachian Trail. It was such a wonderful experience hiking all the way from Maine to Georgia, 2,100 miles, camping out for 5 months that I wanted another experience like that. And even though I'd seen the East Coast, I had never really seen the plains or the West, and I wanted to feel that connection of going from one region to another under my own power. So a bicycle was out of the question, a car was too fast, and walking would have taken probably more than a year. So to avoid that, and still be on foot, I decided to run. So I ran across America from the East Coast to the West, from the familiar to the unfamiliar for me. And I followed a route called the American Discovery Trail. And I was the first person to run that route. It's a connection of existing trails all across America. And that was back in 1998. Seems like a lifetime ago. Then fast forward, I got married. I had two kids, wonderful family, and we all decided to turn our lives upside down and become an international family and teach far away. So we took teaching jobs in the Middle East, in Kuwait, and then after 2 years of that, we wanted some mountains and some green, and we came to Switzerland. We've been here for 5 years. And while here, I thought, well, if I live here now, maybe I should see this place on foot. So I decided to run across Switzerland as my second country. And Switzerland has a series of national trails like the US. And I ran national trail number two called the Trans Swiss Trail. And I started in the southeast and ran to the northwest, crossing many different regions of Switzerland and three different languages from Italian, German, and French, none of which I speak. Even though these maps make it look like they're similar in landmass, don't be fooled by the scale because it is quite different. The US was 8,000 kilometers across, or 4,800 miles. And that took me almost 8 months of running a marathon per day, whereas Switzerland was just 800 kilometers. And I finished that in 10 and a half days. So both wonderful experiences, but very different in terms of the time commitment. Italy, somewhat larger than Switzerland, um, did take me about 3 weeks. So let's talk about that. I wanted a route that people were not going to be surprised to see someone doing. I wanted some locals to see a familiar activity and not be someone who stood out necessarily. So I did some research and I found a route called the Via Francigena, which is a religious pilgrimage. Um, and it seemed like the spring was a good time to do that. Wasn't going to be too hot. Should be plenty of water. Lots of services along the way. And I was really excited to see some history along the way because growing up, I didn't know much about Europe or European history or Italy, of course. And going there, maybe I would find out some of that. Of course, there's food too. Italy's known for its good food, and I was looking forward to many pizzas, focaccia bread, gelato, um, all kinds of things like that. So here's the route. The Via Francigena actually starts in Canterbury, England, and goes all the way down to Rome. It's 1,500 kilometers. Um, and I wasn't going to do the whole thing. I just wanted to be crossing Italy. I had about 3 weeks from my spring break from school where I teach in an international boarding school in the Swiss Alps. But just crossing the northern half of Italy was like a great goal, and maybe I could go a little farther than that even. So I had to figure out, okay, what is this route? Why does it exist? And as I did some research, I found that starting around 600 AD, trade was becoming a thing. People needed routes to get their goods north and south through Europe, and so they eventually defined this kind of corridor where there would be services and villages to support merchants coming through. And once trade was established, and Rome became the kind of epicenter of that time period, the St. Peter's Basilica for the Catholic Church, people started migrating on foot to get there as a part of a religious pilgrimage. And they started that in like 600 AD, and they still do it today, 1400 years later. And this is not a light undertaking for people back in the day. It was a major undertaking. They would start by saving up money and give money to their family members and coworkers and to the church to donate and kind of purify themselves in some way. And they would actually write a will because there were wolves. It was a wild landscape. There were thieves and even assassins. And so they would take shelter in churches along the way, spending the night, making a small donation, eating the local food, and giving confession to absolve themselves of sin. And then when they would get to Rome, and then that would complete the journey. So many people would start in Canterbury, but not everyone. Some people would just start in their home village and pick up on the trail wherever they were. And I was kind of like that. I did transport myself from Switzerland on public transit and got to Milan, and then took a train a little bit farther south to near the border of Tuscany. Um, and that's where my journey picked up to get to Rome and maybe a little bit farther south. So let's go. Let's go to Rome. I didn't run alone most of the time. About half and half, I was alone. So a friend of mine, Lee, who's also from the U.S., was spending the spring in Italy, connecting with his heritage, and he is also a distance runner. And he asked if he could join me for some of it, and I was welcome for that. So he took a train from where he was to join me where I got off the train, and we started running together. This is a picture of typical day on the trail. It was often a wooded path or a dirt path, sometimes a gravel or dirt road, and occasionally a shoulder of a road with car traffic. But it was almost always well marked. Metal signs, placards, stickers, cement little headstones on the side of the trail that someone had made thousands of and spread across Italy. So it was quite easy to stay on the route. And it was just fun knowing that I was running this path that's been in continual use by pedestrians for 1,500 years. And we know it goes back that far because they found documentation from a friar from around 600 AD who documented his journey walking to Rome from Canterbury. It took him 2.5 months. He traveled about 20 kilometers a day, and he stayed in taverns and inns along the way on the route. So I was following in his footsteps and the thousands of pilgrims after him and before me. For my outfit, I sometimes like to mix it up a little bit. For instance, when I ran across Switzerland, I decided to run in a running skirt just because I wanted to see if that was more comfortable or interesting. I mean, the Romans wore skirts, so why not me? My skirt was a Lululemon skirt. It was very comfortable, but I didn't choose to wear that in Italy. Instead, you've heard of blue jeans and you've heard of running shorts. If you combine the two, jeans and shorts, you get jorts. These are nylon running shorts with a denim print on them. So they're not made of denim, but they look a lot like denim Daisy Dukes. And I thought that'd be kind of fun to just run across Italy in my jorts. A kind of painful tourist, you might say. So I wore these and it was fine. I didn't turn too many heads, or at least I didn't see people's heads turning. And I didn't really feel awkward until I got to Rome and entered St. Peter's Basilica, which maybe was a place for a different outfit.
Ciao.
The arrival of Lee. Look at me. Look at you.
That was a robot who delivered our first pizza on the first night before our run started. And I was so craving good pizza um, that I vowed to eat it every day until I couldn't stand it anymore. And I think the first 9 days I ate nothing but pizza with all different toppings and all different crusts and sauces. It was just amazing. But that was the first of many good ones and maybe the best one of the trip. So Lee had joined me at that point, And we started on the path, and the first day or so was mostly shoulders of car roads. But then we started getting into the woods, and I carried a GoPro camera with me, which I put on hyperlapse, and I want to show you a few images from the trail.
Got a huge day today of like 38 miles, and sections of the trail have been wet, but this is like exceptionally fun. Oh man. 26 miles done so far on a 30 or 38 mile day, and came across this lovely little swing. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, whoever did this. Miles to go before I sleep. But man, it feels good to sit down.
To ensure that I got all the way to Rome and maybe past that, I made reservations from home online for lodging each night. And I had to pick how far I was going to go and then stick to that and commit to that. I had wanted to try to cover about 50 kilometers or 32 miles per day. And I was able to do that most days. But all that running meant I needed lots of energy, and that meant more pizza. Um, and so it just kind of became this loop of eat pizza, run real far, get hungry, eat more pizza. And I'm going to show you some more scenes from the trail. Oftentimes it was a nice path. Sometimes it was a little muddy.
I'm on this road leaving Rome. It's perfectly straight, perfectly flat, and 2,000 years old. It's the straightest, longest, oldest road I've ever seen in my life. Got a bit of a road walk. I found this porcupine quill. Pretty cool, pretty lethal. There's about 3 of them there on the side of the road. Hope he's okay. Wow, super cool. Don't see these very often. Certainly not on the road. First time I've ever found one on the road.
That last picture of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, that was a moment that I did not anticipate. I hadn't even thought about it, but growing up, I just had a few wisps of things about culture and the world. And one of them, because it was everywhere I looked in the encyclopedia set we had at home, in my high school, in my middle school history book, was that Tower of Pisa. And I never really imagined I would actually be standing there someday. So when I was running on my route south of Lucca and saw that the Tower of Pisa was just a 15-minute train ride away, well, I had to go see it. So I took a detour, and just to be physically standing in that place where pictures had been taken and presented to me all through my childhood was really a grounding experience and kind of otherworldly. That was really special. I love the treasure hunting on these kinds of trips. I love finding great food. I love finding a flavor of gelato I've never tried before. I love finding things on the side of the road like porcupine quills. And sometimes I love finding things that I never knew existed, like this. It's day 6, and I'm staying with my friend Lee in his place just outside Lucca. I want to tell you about something that happened a couple days ago. Running on the trail, heading south on the Via Francigena, I saw a sign that said, "Up ahead, Presepi." I didn't know what Presepi was. And then I came to a fence line at someone's yard. The trail was going past, and there was a big sign that said Presepi. So I have one here in this bag. He had a bell tied to a string, and I rang that, and I waited. And eventually, an older gentleman came out the front steps and started walking towards the front gate of his house. And I said, "No, here." And I was on the side yard, and he turned around, and came over to me and was smiling at his Presepi. I said, "Beautiful, very nice. I would like one." And he said, and he asked which one, and I pointed to the one that I wanted, and he, and then I handed him the money. This is the thing that I got. It's so cool. You open it, it's like a walnut, and it opens, and inside is another nut. And you open that, and it's a nativity scene. Presepi means nativity scenes. It's so well done. And he was so happy, and he was laughing, and it's such a good memory, this little Presepi. And happy Easter to my Presepi. It was so cool. So cool. One day, Lee and I were running, and while it was well marked, sometimes I would make a wrong turn, and we ended up on a different road, and we had to get back on the route. So we were crossing a field. And as we crossed the kind of top edge of this field, we came across a farmer's pond, and we heard this cacophony of sound that I'd not heard, this melodic nature before. And so we stopped and recorded it. Sometimes you got to get lost to find cool things. But for me, the coolest thing of all of the whole trip was where I stayed each night. So I made reservations ahead of time online. I got apartments in these historic villages, and these villages were on these hilltops overlooking the area of farmland. And I read the history about these on the trip. And from around 600 or so, these would be occupied, and they would control the region. They were economic centers for the region, and they would be taken over by invading communities. And it wasn't like what you see in the movies with like fireballs and tar and spears. They would just literally come at harvest time and set up camp outside these walls and burn the fields. It's really, really harsh, and starve out the people in the walled city. And eventually they would have to give up and surrender. And then the invading neighborhood would come in and take control, and they would have power for 100 or 200 years, and then it would reverse again. And so each night, all through Tuscany, I stayed in these walled cities, and the walls and the buildings and the structures, it's all the same stuff from 2,000 years ago. It's amazing. They've just gone in and upgraded it with, lights and flush toilets and electricity, but you're still in the same structures. You're still living, you're walking on the exact same streets. People still live there, merchants, and they're still catering to travelers coming through. It was so cool. I really loved these places. So enjoy some sights from that.
destination in this fort, top of the hill. Excited about that. Okay, I have to show you how cute this place is. In the middle of town, in the plaza, overlooking the gelato shop. How cool is that? And I'll show you the view outside. Oh my God, that's so awesome. And then, holy cow, big giant 4-poster bed. There's a kitchen in the wardrobe, tea and coffee. Oh my God, look at that shower. That's amazing. Oh man. And there's Brian in his jorts. Woohoo. And the highlight at the end of the day was always to finish off with some gelato. Unfortunately, these walled cities are really popular with tourists during the day, but at night, most of them get on their tour buses and head back to a bigger city. They don't all stay in that walled city. It's only for people like me who made reservations and had a smaller group that could do that. So that meant the gelato shops were closing during dinner. So I had to get into the walled city at late afternoon, check into my place, grab a quick shower, and then go to gelato first because we're not going to miss that, right? And then get a giant dinner and then go back to my room for the night. So that was a lot of fun. So the gelato was a big highlight of the trip, and here's a few images of that. This is gelato number 1, and I don't remember the flavors, but I think I got Carmino and pistachio and arancio. We'll tell you how it is. So a few days after Lee left me, I got a note from my younger daughter who had a few days free on her schedule for spring break, and we talked about her coming and joining me. So she traveled down and met me on my route, and we spent about 5 days hiking together on the Via Francigena, and that was a lot of fun to share some of this experience with her. We're in Bolsena.
Yay!
Long day. We walked 18 miles.
I thought it was Valenza.
Valenza. Yeah, we're in Valenza. That's what I said.
Okay.
And then there's a big castle thing. It's pretty cool. And a lake. A huge lake. A really big lake we walked around the corner of all day. What? Look at the detail. Even the steps are... And with Clara's help, we eventually made it into Rome, which was the ultimate destination of the Via Francigena. Of course, some people live south of Rome in southern Italy, and they also want to walk there as a religious pilgrimage. So the route actually continues beyond Rome. And my plan was to also do a few days of the southern section as well. But getting into Rome is a big deal because you can go to the St. Peter's Basilica as a pilgrim, as we're called on the pilgrimage. You get to cut the line, and the line is like 2,000 people long. So I did actually change shorts. I put on my evening shorts, which were a little more conservative, and I went to the coat room, which is where you go as a pilgrim and tell them that you have made it
You've walked at least the last 3 days, 100 something kilometers, and then they give you a certificate. And of course, I'd done many more than that. But he signed a certificate, and then I was allowed to walk into the basilica and tour that, even while there was a service going on. And out front were all the chairs where the Pope gives his weekly address. And it was just really neat to see that. Very emotional, even for someone who's not a practicing Catholic.
The Arch of Constantine and the Colosseum, and the crowds are forming at 8:30 in the morning when it opens. Get your tickets early. It was day 13 on Via Francigena. Just left Rome. I walked out of town with 2 other pilgrims, Sandro and a very nice woman. She's 69 years old. Didn't want me recording her for social media, but she's from France. Amazing woman. She's done just about every Camino there is. And she walked from her home in France, to Rome. And today she resumed her trek starting in Rome and is headed all the way down Italy for the remainder of the Via Francigena here.
Some other hikers I met along the way. And my ultimate goal after Rome was actually to see Pompeii. So after running a couple of days south of Rome, I took a train just a little bit south to Pompeii and got to tour that. And all I remembered from Pompeii growing up was that some people were buried by ash, but it was so much more than that, and such a treat to get to experience that. This is a loaf of bread that had been baked the day that Mount Vesuvius erupted 2,000 years ago. You can imagine that. And the bread is now carbonized. It's the profile of what the loaf had looked like. And all of these artifacts were completely preserved perfectly under ash for 2,000 years while this community was forgotten about. And only recently, in the last couple centuries, has it been uncovered. And so, of course, the outlines of the people, their artifacts, their artwork, Aramis there, their mosaics, their paintings. It was just incredible and a great way to end the trip. And when I finished, I got to Naples and I was about to head home. And across the street from my apartment was a store called I'm Brian. So not only did I find Italy and world culture, but I found myself. Enjoy. I encourage you to go down and check it out. Thanks so much for watching.